they walked around to know that this is a pretty dangerous environment. It's a very tough environment. And so when I hear people, threatening that they're going to organize protests and come to my house, my wife tells me that she's not letting the kids answer the phone anymore, not letting the kids walk down the street by themselves, I take this very seriously.
Are you and your family concerned about the protest that's planned at your house for this weekend? Are you doing anything to prepare for that?
I don't know if that's going to materialize or not. We've been in touch with Cincinnati Police. They've been wonderful. They've been sending folks, by the neighborhood. A squad car was in front of the house today for quite some time. But, I don't want the Cincinnati Police using their resources looking after me. They should be guarding the neighborhood. They should be going after criminals. And I just think it's unfortunate that the political discourse here has gotten as bad as it has. And I think that's in part because some of the rhetoric you hear on the floor.
I feel like I understand that argument that you're making very clearly. I think that making insightful statements and using insightful and charged rhetoric can very easily create a climate that is more threatening than otherwise. What I wonder, though, and I honestly just don't know, is if members of Congress, if other people in leadership positions have the same capacity to dial it down. I don't know that there is any real equivalent of uninsightful language. I don't know if they have the capacity to calm it down. Can you unring that bell?
Well, I would hope so. I think if John Boehner gets out there and goes down to the well and tells people to tone it down, if he apologizes for the statements he's made and the statements some others have made, I think that would go a long, long way if they just tone down the rhetoric. But today he issued a statement and he just politicized it. He said we should be working toward a majority and stop, focusing on violence, or, he rejects violent behavior. He needs to own this problem because he's part of it. And so I think the members need to understand that their words matter, their actions matter, and they need to ask their supporters to tone it down.
One last question for you, Congressman. I know that the Capitol Police have briefed members of Congress about security. Every member of Congress I've ever talked to about Capitol Police have great faith in their abilities. Can you tell us anything about either advice that the Capitol Police have given you or any way that they've reassured members about security steps they're taking?
The Capitol Police have been fantastic. I think the members here know that they're in good hands with the Capitol Police, and we feel perfectly safe around here. The Capitol Police did a great job this weekend with some of the protesters that were getting a little out of hand. But, we're fine here. I'm far more worried about my family back home and the families of other members back home. You mentioned Tom Perriello's brother. This is the type of stuff we're facing. And I think, there's reason to be concerned.
Congressman Steve Drieuhaus, Democrat of Ohio, thank you very much for your time today, sir. I'm sorry you're going through this.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Do you remember with the stimulus how a whole bunch of Republicans not only voted against it, but they trashed it? They said it's bad for America, it wouldn't create any jobs, it was a complete waste of money. Then they went back to their home districts and bragged about how the stimulus was so great for their district. Remember the blatant hypocrisy on the stimulus? Well, boy, it didn't take long for the same thing to happen on health reform. The ink on the bill isn't even dry yet, and Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley is already a stimulus-style hypocrite on health reform. Senator Grassley not only voted against health reform every step of the way, he also denounced health reform in some of the craziest ways that health reform was denounced.
And there's some fear because in the House bill, there's counseling for end of life.
That's it.
And from that standpoint, you have every right to fear.
When you couple this with all the other fears that people have and what they do in England, then you get the idea that somebody's going to decide grandmas live too long.
I've been told that the brain tumor that Senator Kennedy has, because he's 77 years old, would not be treated the way it's treated in the United States. In other words, he would not get the care that he gets here because of his age.
We should not have a government program that determines you're going to pull the plug on grandma.
That's some of the choicer things that Chuck Grassley has said about how bad and evil and murderous health reform is. But now Chuck Grassley has sent out a press release taking credit for provisions in the health reform bill and talking about how great they are, even though he voted against the bill. So he, to be clear, voted against the thing he's taking credit for. Senator Grassley simultaneously is vehemently opposed to and very proud of health reform. And he's apparently not embarrassed by these two sides of his face being at war with one another. Close on Chuck Grassley's heels in the race for the ought to be most embarrassed about health reform award today is Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming. Mr. Barrasso made this allegation about Democratic Congressman Jim Matheson of Utah this week.
In Utah, a member that Utah who voted on the bill, he was against it, then he was for it, and what a coincidence that his brother just got named to be a federal judge.
Ooh. Here's what's embarrassing about that, Senator Barrasso. You know that guy you're sliming and saying voted for health reform in some sort of dodgy, corrupt quid pro quo? Does it matter at all to you that the guy that you're sliming here didn't actually vote for health reform? Does that affect your argument in any way? Or is that immaterial? According to Senator Barrasso's spokesperson, Mr. Barrasso misspoke on this issue. There is one portion of health reform that has not passed yet. In order to try to stop that, Republicans are now essentially trying to shut down the Senate. Watch this clip. Watch what happened this morning. This is in the middle of a hearing on homeless U.S. military veterans.
In the HUD studies, sponsored by HUD, and in the VA studies as part of the Chronic Homelessness Initiative in 2003, that 85% housing stability number is the same number that the researchers that conducted those studies found. So,
thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry, but I must interrupt this hearing here. Committees are allowed to meet while the Senate is in session based on the unanimous consent of the members. And this is a standard procedural agreement that is always permitted. However, there's been an objection on the floor to allowing most committees, including our committee, to meet.
Starting at around 11 o'clock this morning, in an action that will have no effect on health reform whatsoever, Republicans have just decided to shut down Senate hearings on pretty much everything. Not because they object to what's happening in those hearings, but because they're just mad. Hearings that were already underway, like the one about homeless vets you just saw, hearings that were already underway were interrupted, stopped dead in their tracks. Hearings that hadn't started yet had to be canceled, including, for example, one on our military policy toward North Korea.
I would note that this unanimous consent request is supported by my ranking member, Senator McCain. We have 3 commanders scheduled to testify this afternoon. They've been scheduled for a long time. They've come a long, long distance. One of them has come from Korea. One of them has come from Hawaii. And I would therefore ask unanimous consent that this previously scheduled and currently scheduled hearing of the Committee on Armed Services be allowed to proceed.
Madam President.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
Senator from North Carolina.
As a member of the committee, and I side myself with the chair and the ranking